Does every airport in the US actually have de-icing equipment, even in the South? Have you ever been caught short?
There's always a de-icing system. It may require waiting for the sun to warm up the airplane.
Right.
Welcome to the KnowEntry podcast, presented by No Delay.
Hi, and welcome to the KnowEntry podcast, where we take you behind the cockpit door to provide some knowledge that might make your travel experience just a little bit smoother. Joined by Noel Malone and Jeff Murray, both experienced pilots, and Doug Cameron, longtime aviation journalist, always willing to learn. So it's cold outside. De-icing. How necessary is it? We've seen it happen at the gate. We've seen these big machines come. It's like you're going through a giant car wash. No, lead us through. What are the mechanics and where does that happen?
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, it's this time of year, I mean, the most important thing is the airplane, like we've talked about in previous podcasts. The airplane has to be clean of any kind of frozen precipitation, snow, ice, things like that, frost. So it really happens in one of two places, either at the gate, either before departure or immediately after you push back, or it happens at a remote site. And that's a function largely of airport rules, maybe the capacity of number of trucks, things like that. But as far as the gate, that's typically the place where if it's a relatively standard situation, not a lot of accumulated snow, that's the most efficient way because a lot of it, the prep can be done before passengers even arrive with the first application, what we call type 1 fluid. That's the removal component. And then type 4 is applied typically right after you push back because there is a time limitation on how long that fluid will last. So you want that to be efficient. So if you expect largely that from that point, you're going to taxi the runway and get airborne, at the gate is typically where it happens. But sometimes it happens at a remote pad. So Jeff, I know you've experienced that recently.
Yeah. So, I mean, like Noam talked about, I mean, typically, even as flight crew, as pilots, we like to see it done at the gate. Passengers do too, because typically you'll get done de-icing. You can sequence with the folks, tower and ground control and get out for a takeoff. But if it's a more impactful weather event, heavy snow, ice, winds, think of, almost blizzard type conditions, what will typically happen is the airport, in conjunction with the airlines, will say, we're going to use the de-icing pad. And it's a big area, looks like, in the summer months, just goes like a big area of open taxiway. But in fact, there's a whole science that goes into where you're going to park and when, they're going to start the application, like Noam said, of the type 1 and type 4 fluid. But it's a centralized location. And what that means is you're going to leave the gate, you're going to start the motors, and the wings in the airplane may still have snow on them. And you're going to taxi over to, at O'Hare, it's called the CDF, the Central De-icing Facility. It's on the west side of the airport. So you got to spend 20 or 25 minutes taxiing over there. You got to get yourself positioned into one of the spots where they're going to want you to de-ice. You're going to talk to all these specialized de-ice guys on the radio who are going to sequence you there. Then you're going to have to go through the process of shutting down the motors and all that stuff. And then what's going to happen, Noam? What's next? You shut down the motors. What's next?
And you're going to
get... Can I just ask, would you tell the passengers that, in fact, we're not off to the runway, we're off to the de-icing pad?
Yeah. Absolutely, because at some airports, and I won't mention any specifically, that de-ice pad can be further from your departure runway than the gate. So, not only do you need to tell all the folks that, hey, we're going to de-ice, but it's like, hey, we're going to de-ice in the next, literally like in the next county. And then we're going to have to come back to our county to take off. So it's when you're going to the de-icing pad almost anywhere, except maybe Anchorage and a couple other airports that are just machines with this stuff, it takes a lot of time.
So if you're in the back of the airplane and you hear the pilot say, we're going to the centralized de-icing facility, it's going to take longer than if you had just been de-iced at the gate. But that may not be an option. Like Jeff said, it's usually a function of conditions. Could be some other things, but usually a function of conditions that they just simply can't handle at the gate.
Right. I mean, Noam and I fly with different pilots all the time. And I remember flying with one captain and, and we're all like, when we're leaving our house or leaving our hotel and getting ready to go out and fly, we're looking at certain apps to see whether we're going to de-ice at the gate or whether they're using the, de-icing facility and all that stuff. And one guy that I flew with, I mean, he would literally beg, borrow, and steal. He would talk to everybody who could. Hey, any chance we can get de-iced at the gate? Hey, any chance we can, avoid the de-icing pad? Because it just adds so much time. And it also makes it more complex for Noam and I. There's more procedures we need to do. We need to get the aircraft configured differently, but it's just really time consuming.
So, Noam, you have to turn off the engines before you can get de-iced, either at the pad or at the gate?
No, that's a function of procedure. For the most part, if it's at the gate, it's with the engines off. But at the remote pad, it's usually with the engines on.
Got it. Okay. I can see why it makes sense to do it at the gate just because of proximity, but doesn't it make just a big old mess, which might be easier to clear up on a pad, which, might have knock-on effects on other planes? So how do they kind of manage the mess, if you know what I mean? No, you've spent a lot of time in airline operations. Is that something you have to think about?
Absolutely. In fact, that's the thing that a lot of times beyond the weather conditions, one of the reasons that you'll have a remote pad is for collecting all that de-icing fluid, which is a lot easier to do in a centralized place than at a gate that isn't necessarily designed. So they actually have machines that will sweep it up or drains that will specifically capture it because, these chemicals are not great for other than de-icing. I don't know how healthy they are for. So anyway, so that's usually one of the reasons you'll have a de-icing pad is so that you can capture those chemicals and avoid them getting, into other systems.
And the other reason is you've got the de-icing equipment really in one facility. So, imagine, Noam and I are talking as pilots, but as a guy who's doing the de-icing, you got to move the truck around. You got, people moving around the ramp. You've got, marshalers all over the place. Like if you're one of the guys driving the truck or doing the de-icing, I am sure the last thing you want to be doing is doing the de-icing at the gate. When you're out at the de-icing facility, where you're out the de-icing pad, you're sitting in your truck. Here comes an airplane. I spray this, I spray that. I get on the radio. Boom, that airplane goes, and there's another one. So it is, I'm probably being a little too dramatic in how much time it takes. I am sure if you talk to the airport authorities, they'd be like, time to de-ice in a pad is a lot shorter than at the gate because we don't have to move the equipment around. The guys don't have to get repositioned. Everything's really efficient.
And to add to that, I would say at a pad, you're usually sprayed by two trucks. So each truck is doing one side of the aircraft, where at the gate, you have one. And as Jeff said, they're trying to navigate all the other ground equipment and then get around to the other side of the airplane, much more, much tighter quarters. So, I think the pad is definitely much more efficient.
It is not easy for those folks. I was de-icing once at an outstation. We were in Allentown, Pennsylvania, getting de-iced. So, a couple aircraft coming in and out of there every day. You've got one truck, that truck, who only de-ices 3 or 4 months a year. The truck hit us. It hit the aircraft, took us completely out of service, and the plane was gummed up for days.
Oof. Does every airport in the US actually have de-icing equipment, even in the South? Have you ever been caught short because they either haven't had enough or haven't had any?
There's always a de-icing system. It may require waiting for the sun to warm up the airplane.
Right. And
that's high tech.
It's a good question. And it's kind of a funny question because there are airports in the South when there was the polar vortex, and I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 years ago. I'm thinking of maybe it was Tallahassee, Florida, and that kind of thing that got impacted with just light snow, but it was enough snow and frost to contaminate the wing of the aircraft, and they're like, "What are we going to do? We don't have de-icing."
Well, I lived in Houston for 2 years. It snowed once in the 2 years, and I think it was the first time in 10 years it had snowed.
Right.
That certainly had an impact.
Yep.
Bush is not O'Hare in terms of its prep.
Right. Right.
urban facilities. So what else can go wrong in terms of from a pilot's perspective, in terms of the availability of de-icing equipment? Jeff, I don't know if you've had, apart from your car crash or plane bumping incident,
Yes.
what else
So,
may
I mean,
not?
it's the beginning, we're in the beginning of the de-icing season now. We're just going into the holiday season and all that.
Yeah.
And it was a week and a half ago. I was at an outstation. I won't mention where. And, they were getting all psyched up. They're like, we're ready to de-ice and all that stuff. We were the number 3 or number 4 aircraft to get de-iced. They came up, started de-icing us, and you can hear the fluid hitting the top of the aircraft. You can look out the window, see them spraying the wings and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden it stops. We're like, what happened? We're getting on the radio and we're like, hey, flight 123, you guys. And they're like, this sheepish guy gets on the radio. He's like, well, we ran out of fluid. We got to go back to the depot to fill up the truck. So in the time to fill up the truck, it's snowing. It was only type 1 fluid. And lo and behold, we need to go through the whole process of the type 1 again, handed it to type 4 and all that stuff. But that was more emblematic, I would say, of, it's the beginning of the travel season.
Right.
It's the beginning of the winter travel season.
Was your flight on time?
We were not on time, but we did attempt. We went really fast on the way back. Truthfully, I think we actually left 45 minutes or 50 minutes late, and we got to the gate. We were coming to O'Hare. We got to the gate at O'Hare maybe 5 or 6 minutes late.
I'll tell you this, just from some of my experience working in other jobs in the airline, at the larger hubs in particular, they're in the off season, like around the summertime, there's all this pre-planning, all this tabletop exercises to prevent exactly what Jeff just described from happening. It's like, what did we learn from last season about where to stage the trucks and how much fluid do we need and what are the long-term forecasts and all these variables. There's so much planning that goes into this so that while there likely will be a delay, how do we minimize it? How do we make sure that from our passengers' perspective, we're doing this as quickly and as efficiently as possible?
But you can still get hit by curveballs. It was a few years ago, I remember there was like a national shortage of particular types of fluid.
Correct.
Just left everybody in a not particular.
Yeah, and this fluid isn't, it's not like you can just, go fill up a truck with the de-icing fluid you're getting down at your auto parts supply store. I mean, this is like heavily engineered, really remarkable fluid. And, a truck needs to carry 2 types of it. It's got the type 1, which is to clear the aircraft. It's the type 4, which is to keep the aircraft clear after it's already been cleared. So it's a really big deal. And in terms of the desktop exercises, the preparation, I mean, there is I think they actually call it like the Super Bowl of de-icing. And there's a group of airline folks who keep track of, hey, there was a big snow event in Denver and Seattle, and they will award the airport that did the best. Like, folks who do this take it really, really seriously. It's a big deal.
Just drip off the wing. How does it? Does it clean itself? How does the plane clean itself?
It's actually remarkable, remarkable properties of chemistry. So it's actually very thick, very sticky, almost like molasses. And when it's applied to the wing, it stays on so that it could, in any precipitation that's falling, any snow or ice, is captured by the fluid. But you don't want gallons and gallons of this liquid on your wing as you're taking off. So as you roll down the runway, what you'll notice roughly around, let's call it about halfway down the takeoff roll, but it happens at about 100 knots, but as a passenger, you might not know that speed. But about halfway down the runway, if you're looking out the window, you'll see it shear off. And it basically becomes like water and runs off the wing, carrying any accumulated snow that it's captured and leaving the wing clean and without all that extra weight, so you can take off and the airplane can meet its performance requirements for takeoff. It's actually pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's remarkable stuff. I mean, it's remarkable. But it is slippery as heck on the ramp. I mean, and, even from a safety perspective, I think Noam, you ran an operations control center at one point. I'm sure the airports don't like the fact that they de-ice at the gate because that fluid is so slippery. You've got folks, loading bags, doing the,
Right.
fueling and all that stuff. I am sure it is a big time safety hazard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots of injuries
Yep.
in the winter.
Okay. But for the passenger's safety. So, Noam, Jeff, thanks very much. We've covered a lot of ground here. De-icing is absolutely necessary for safety, but it can also be both very time consuming and have a pretty big impact on your journey time. So hopefully everyone's learned a little bit here about the process and at least how not to be frustrated about it. So thanks for listening to the KnowEntry podcast. And again, if you want to learn a little bit more about the travel process, then you can look at No Delay, which can offer exclusive information about ways to reduce your travel time by being aware of potential delays. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining the KnowEntry podcast. For more information, visit KnowDelay.com.